Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about some of the crime dramas that I'm watching that I really like. For this episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Limitless. In this episode, we have Brian kind of avoiding Rebecca, after the whole thing that happened last episode where he discovered Sands is the one that killed Rebecca's dad, and, holding on to that information. He doesn't want to be around her just because he'll feel guilty about the fact of not telling her all this information, but he can't tell her without admitting the whole him working for Mora and being a mole within the FBI. To deal with, the kind of stress and try to avoiding her, he's going out on the town, popping his NZT, and basically helping the local police, solve crimes. I do really like that part where he's, talking, like he does most times. So he's inside his head talking to his other self. And basically he's like, oh, you can avoid Rebecca, but you can't avoid me. I'm inside your head. So he creates like a phone interface, and then he presses a decline button to make himself disappear. I thought that was kind of neat. We have Rebecca, finally getting in touch with Brian and realizing that he's helping the police by being on NZT. So he's like, how she doesn't like the fact is that he's stashing pills and he's lying about it. He even tells her oh, this is, that said pill that he ended up getting today was the last pill he had stashed. But she's like, okay, but you can obviously tell she doesn't believe him. And that comes up too later on in the episode. But basically, the city's in a blackout. They don't know whether it's a terrorist attack or something else. Brian essentially figures out that it's something specific causing the blackout. And it turns out that specific something is basically a bacteria. In the beginning, they're thinking it was, when Rebecca and Brian get quarantined later on in the episode, you think it's okay, it's it's not a type of bacteria that passes from person to person. It doesn't affect people like that. It seems to only affect inanimate objects. But essentially, it seemed like it was a foreign, an alien substance, bacteria. But ends up finding out it's something here on Earth. Essentially, it's a bacteria that eats electrons, hence the whole blackout, because it was essentially eating the electricity from the power plant. It was something that was spread in the air, and a recent storm scattered it across the city. Essentially ended up finding out that basically it was a scientist who had discovered it. Basically he had a bet with another scientist about aliens existing, and the whole point was to spread that bacteria around just so he can win the bet to be okay, aliens exist. But this whole blackout thing was actually a plan, because basically knock out the power and then basically go to this facility where the government stashes what's quote unquote mutilated money. It's I think it's basically money that's I'm not sure how to put it in words. It basically is damaged money. But basically, if you steal it, it's still usable. And if you clean it up, it can be used as used currency. And it ends up being about $8 million that was stolen, as well as the security guard of the place ends up getting killed. One of the cases, Brian was helping the police at the beginning of the episode led to this whole blackout thing. But it wasn't the scientist himself who did it. He spread the bacteria around, hoping to make people think aliens, but it was actually, in the end, you end up finding out it's his assistant who had done it. Her and her cousin worked together to, steal the money. So, pretty big things happened in this episode because, while Rebecca and Brian were locked up, like I said, Rebecca didn't appreciate the whole, Brian lying about having pills. He's like, oh, this was my last one. And, like I said, she didn't seem like she 100% believed him. Well, that's because she didn't, because when he was using her phone earlier, he saw some pictures. Essentially, Rebecca had Brian's house raided and found two of the 4 remaining pills he had left. And he's like, what the heck is this? And then she's like, you sat here and lied to my face. He's like, well, why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to tell me, because I already knew the truth, but you still sat here and lied to my face. And basically she was kind of like, I don't like this, Brian, because basically you're acting like an addict. This whole situation, you're acting like an addict who's hiding his drugs, hiding the fact is that you have more than one NZT pill, all these, pills stashed away, which she's under the impression that he's been, stashing them one at a time. He can't admit that, like, how he got them is from Mora, at least most of them. And he kind of goes off on her. He's like, you calling me an addict? Well, you're an addict too, because basically you're going through all this situation and you're addicted to the pills too, because you're addicted to, like, how much of a big impact these pills make. It's like all the, like, cases we go together and we solve them, that you need these pills just as much as I do, which is kind of messed up on Brian's part. He should never have said that, because Rebecca's only saying all this stuff because she genuinely cares about him, and she just wants to make sure he's okay, because they don't 100% understand his immunity. We understand it, but they don't understand it. And she's like, maybe there's a limit to your immunity, and maybe you're not affected by it like other people, but maybe you are still being affected and we don't know how. And you stashing all these pills, having, more than one that you can pop at any time, it could be dangerous. But, Rebecca was super hurt by what Brian said, and he was like, essentially, he tried to apologize, but it really hurt Rebecca, the whole situation. So she went to Naz and suggested, asked for him to basically get a new handler, for Boyle to become his new handler, because they're done. And then we have that pretty big confrontation in the end of the episode between Brian and his mom. Because basically Rachel, his sister, had found the pills in his apartment and ended up telling their parents about pretty much everything. His mom went to his dad about it, but his dad, didn't tell her anything. And he was like, no, Brian, you have to be the one that, he's like, Brian was like, your dad. And he's like, no, Brian, you have to tell her yourself. And basically, at this whole time, keep in the back of your mind, Ike and Mike were there. So during that whole situation, she ended up telling him everything, even about the situation about Sands, the quote unquote undercover cop, who was bleeding who came to his apartment bleeding. And basically his mom goes off on him. She's like, she's tired, she doesn't know what these pills do, and she doesn't want to know. And Brian's like, I can't tell you everything, but then she cuts him off. She's like, no, Brian, you're not going to sit here and give me excuses. You're not going to lie to me until you're willing to tell me everything. Like, essentially kind of situation with his dad, like, you're no longer welcome here. And you see his sister there, like, because she didn't expect things to turn out the way they did. And she's just like, I'm sorry. And then he's just, it breaks your heart, dude, because it's like, I don't know. Essentially, the two pills Rachel had taken from his house, Mike and Ike grab and take. And it's just like, you see Brian there just like brokenhearted, and he gets up and, possibly leaves. We also have Ike asking Rachel like the next day about that whole situation, about this specific undercover cop that she had seen him with. And then we have Rebecca looking for Brian. And then she ends up finding a letter on his desk in the FBI, at the FBI, and ends up reading the letter. And basically it's him apologizing for everything he said, that he now knows he has to go and try and make things right. You see him with a picture of that assassin girl from a few episodes back, the one who tried to take down Mora. Her and Brian worked together to fake her death. But that combined with the preview of the next episode can obviously tell you that they're going to meet up. So this next episode is going to have something to do with them trying to take down Mora. He's like basically like, but Brian was essentially like in his letter, he's like, I have to make things right. So you might not be seeing me for a while. So, but and I kind of like the lines. At least, the awesome thing about, our time of working together, at least we had the laws, And basically, Brian had secretly stolen the pills back from Mike, earlier, before he left his parents' house. So he takes those pills and packs up his stuff and leaves. So next episode is going to be a pretty interesting episode, which I'm selling short to all the other episodes. But, it's going to be interesting to see the turn of events that go down next episode after this whole thing. You have Mike and Ike investigating that whole Sands angle. Yeah, the whole thing about his Brian and his family. It's just like, this was not Brian's episode, dude. Like, everything just kind of fell apart for him. His relationship with his family, as well as his relationship with Rebecca, just I don't know, it just kind of got hit on all fronts on this episode. But that's really all I want to talk about in this episode. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.